asking the question, are fears of cancel culture killing the arts and cultural world? This week, we saw a number of stories of writers and artists speaking out against cancel culture or becoming a victim of it. Firstly, award-winning Nigerian writer Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie penned a scathing essay on her website where she decried the impact of social media, fashionable cultural orthodoxies, and cancel culture. Chimamanda's letter comes in the same week wherein the Royal Academy pulled artist Jessie D. Wall's work from a gift shop over her allegedly transphobic views. They claim that Jessie D. Walls was in conflict with their values based off of a 2019 blog where she wrote that she was criticising the idea that women was not an adult human female, and she argued that it wasn't just an identity or feeling, the idea of being a woman. So what's going on in the arts and cultural world? Does the art and cultural world have a free speech problem? Or are we merely seeing a long overdue realignment where the balance of power is tilting towards the previously underrepresented and marginalised? Well, we're joined by writer and ceramic artist Claire to help us make sense of what's going on in the art and cultural world. Thank you for joining us, Claudia.
You're welcome. Good morning. Yeah.
Do you think that the arts and cultural world does have a free speech problem?
Yes, I do think it does. It tends to lean towards safety and not rocking the boat. That seems to be the sort of primary concern. It's a very anxious space to be at the moment.
But when many people think of artists and people that work in these industries, we often think about people that challenge orthodoxy, challenge conventional wisdom. How is this new perception of art as something that's safe emerged?
Primarily through a combination of fear and ignorance and extreme political naivety. So in the art world, we have artists, curators, museum people, and they're hugely knowledgeable about art. They know a great deal about art, a great deal about artists, and that's what they're trained to know, that's what they should know. But they have very little knowledge of law, particularly as it governs the right to free expression. And the politics is very shallow.
Yeah.
It's more like mimicry. It's not really a real deep understanding of political issues. And I think when it's just when it is just mimicry and you're following a prescribed line, you've got rules, because rules make life easy. People love rules. That makes you safe. You know where you are. You stay on that side of the line, you're good. You're on that side of the line, you're a baddie. And that's how they do it. So instead of actually considering the question or the issues with care and discussing them with people and bringing in a diversity of experience and opinion, they will simply stay one side of the rules and then convince themselves they are, as they might say, on the right side of history.
No, but is there anything really new about this cultural moment? I mean, even if we look at history, we had people, we've always had moral censors,
Yes.
people, religious people disagreeing with what artists were doing. We had people fearful of obscenity in art. Is there anything particularly new about what's going on?
No, I think it's really just another turn of the circle. It's just another chapter in the same book. I mean, when I wrote Subversive Ceramics and I was looking at the history of ceramics, I found 15 potters were executed in Faenza in 1569 because they were Protestants. They believed in the wrong religion. Then there's the artist Daumier, who the Royal Academy actually mounted a superb show of Daumier's work some years ago. Daumier was imprisoned repeatedly for wrongthink. And artists right the way through history have found themselves in this space where actually they suddenly come under attack for relatively pedestrian ideas. I mean, Daumier was a committed Republican. He was very critical of the king and cronies, but, nothing particularly outlandish about his politics.
Well, I want to kind of stillman or almost be as generous as possible as I can to people that do these things. I mean, do you sometimes think that perhaps you have to curtail or limit the free speech of others in order to allow other people to express themselves more freely? Because, I mean, if you look at it, we have seen an explosion in more performances, artwork from people from, ethnic minority groups, from part of the LGBT community. I mean, isn't that a good thing? And hasn't what we've seen opened up this space for more people, just not the people that we're traditionally used to?
Well, competing priorities. I mean, in principle, that might be the case. Way back in 2011, I wrote an article about this, just after some of my own work had been subject to, first it was going to be removed, and then it was exhibited in such a way that only one half of the work could be seen. And what I found when I rang around all the museums, and when I tried talking to people who were teaching, curating courses, for example, not a single one of them, not one, made any commitment to the right to free expression. None of them really understood what it was. They thought that free expression was a kind of free-for-all. But there have always been legal limits on free expression. That isn't new. We're not allowed to incite hatred or violence. There are perfectly good reasons for that. But the thing about an argument, a political debate of any sort, it has to be conducted in public, in good faith, and won on the merits of the argument. That can be very difficult. It can make the people feel quite vulnerable when talking. But, I've had that experience myself. You tried being a feminist campaigning against pornography. Not that easy, actually. I'm a feminist that campaigns against the sex trade. Trust me, that's not a fashionable position in the art world. You really do have to, learn how to cope. You have to toughen up. Feminists have dealt with this for centuries, actually, but in my own life for decades. So, yes, I hear what you're saying, but there's still, the understanding of what the right to free expression is still needs to be there.
But is it really that bad? I mean, oftentimes people that claim to be cancelled find themselves in national newspapers expressing themselves very widely and freely, and oftentimes that actually gains a much more traction. Isn't there a danger in the idea of cancel culture, or the way in which it's used, being used to kind of silence legitimate criticism?
Well, what you're seeing is the tip of a much bigger iceberg. For most of us who have exhibitions cancelled, or work withdrawn from exhibitions, or events cancelled, you can barely get it outside your own Facebook page. It gets little or no traction at all. It's an absolute miracle if someone notices. In the case of Jess DeVos, she's had a ton of bad experience before this happened. It's only because the Royal Academy, a big name, did it, that it hit the newspapers. And the same with Rachel Arra before her. It was only because it happened in a university that the editor of the Times Educational Supplement took an interest. So it's really hit and miss.
Well, last question. One thing I'm wondering is, surely artists historically have always kind of been quite subversive and found new ways in order to explore their craft and to get their ideas and their artwork to greater attention. How does a young artist who is, not enjoying this stifling cultural climate actually find a way to express themselves freely? Is there any place in which they can do that? What's your advice for them?
Oh, right. There's never been a problem with expressing yourself freely. The issue is whether or not you can show that you're doing so. That's really where the problem lies. That's where the censors are active. They get between the artist and the audience. And that's the issue. So, and there are ways around that. And a great many artists thrive now on Instagram, on Patreon, in all sorts of sites and ways. There are ways around it. Some of us are conducting our own kind of, what used to be called salons. Those are kind of coming back so that we can share our work in small groups and build up slowly from there.
Thank you so much, Claudia.
You're very welcome.
Fascinating stuff, writer and ceramic artist. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, very interesting indeed. Right, coming up, safely back from her road trip all around the UK, Rosie Wright's here to tell us all about it. First, though, let's get the weather.